Commissioner, good to have you back in studio. Thank you for making the time.
Thanks for having me, Vashi.
I'll start off just where that introduction left off on the announcement or the press conference that you held on Thanksgiving Monday. In that press conference, you explained that the reason you were making these details public that's not a sort of normal course of business for the RCMP is because of the threat to public safety. Now that these 6 diplomats are out of Canada, has that threat been reduced in your estimation?
Yes, I can confirm from different techniques that we use in normal investigation and reach out from the committee. I can confirm that there's been a significant reduction in the threats.
And how do you qualify significant?
Well, you look at some of the key players, and I said it in my statement on Thanksgiving Day. I did say how you had diplomats as well as consular officials that were involved working on behalf of the government of India, on top of agents as well. So you look at the government of Canada expelling these 6 people have had an impact on what we're seeing in the South Asian communities.
Is the threat eliminated because of their expulsion?
I can't say that the threat would be forever eliminated, because like any organized crime group or in the criminal space, they reorganize and find a different way of doing things. And I will highlight the fact that this is not unique here, because you saw a week ago the U.S. indictment, which indicted government official who resides in India, as well as a well-known organized crime individual who is in India, who actually was orchestrated a contract on an American citizen. So what we saw here, we're seeing in other places as well.
So would you, if they were, for example, to be replaced, because my understanding is that has not, it's not being instructed that they can't be replaced, would you worry again about the threat to public safety based on what you know?
I think based on what I know, I would have a concern, but again, for the process for them to enter Canada, I'll leave that up to Global Affairs Canada, because I'm not really quite familiar as to what happens when someone comes into the country.
You spoke broadly about the threat that you, in your estimation, those agents of the government in India posed, and in particular their links to the use of organized crime in very, very serious crimes across Canada. The Foreign Affairs Minister took it a step further and linked them specifically as persons of interest to the murder of Mr. Nijjar. Do you draw the same link? Yeah,
so I got to be careful with the fact that the Nijjar case is before the courts. And when we came out on Thanksgiving Day, it was really, and we've said this all along, there has always been a separate and distinct investigation on the involvement of government of India in criminality in Canada, and that's when we came out that was specific to that and nothing to do with the Nijjar case, which is before the courts.
So is it because it's before the courts that you can't comment on it? Or I'm just trying to ascertain, because you did comment on the other stuff. So is this that stuff is also at certain instances before the courts, because you mentioned a number of homicides, a number of other investigations. Is none of that before the courts, and that's why you can say that?
But I didn't go into details on the others. So you have the Nijjar case that's before the courts, and the individuals are allowed a fair trial, and disclosures happen through the court process. The others, when we talked about other homicides, extortion, coercion, harassment, we've spoke broadly, but did not get into the details because there's still ongoing investigations.
So when it comes to the Nijjar case, because we did speak about this last time, the criminality that's already been exposed or alleged criminality was already being investigated. Are you still, as a force, investigating a potential link to the government of India?
So we have multiple investigations on the go, and we follow the lead and the evidence, and sometimes you never know where this might lead you to. So I'll leave it at that, because we still have ongoing investigations.
So you can't say whether or not you're investigating links to the government of India in the Nijjar case?
Well, anything that pops up in the file would eventually lead us here, because when you start a file, you don't know where this file might lead you. Until you talk to a person or seize a phone or do some investigation techniques. It could, other files could lead us very well to the government of India, as other files may not.
But you can't be specific. I'm just trying to understand, because you did make this announcement, and a lot of Canadians are interested, right? And the government has gone so far as to be specific, despite the fact it's before the courts. But you cannot, or you just won't?
But I cannot, out of respect, and I'm not quite sure what Minister Joly said in public. So
well, she said exactly what I said. They're people of interest in the murder of Mr. Nijjar.
I would say, and I've said it quite openly in my comments on Thanksgiving, that we are investigating diplomats, consular officials that have direct ties through agents up to the government of India in different crimes, as I mentioned, homicide, coercion, harassment.
If you could also shed some light on First of all, the decision to take these allegations and the warning to the public, and also the sort of timeline, because I know you have gone over it before, but I'll tell you why I'm asking. The expelled High Commissioner made a point of saying repeated times, despite many challenges, that no evidence has ever been shared with either your counterparts in law enforcement in India or the government's counterparts. Can you give me a blanket response to that, and then I'll ask you for some details?
Yeah, so Deputy Commissioner Flynn attempted on numerous occasions to reach out to his counterpart and was willing to go to India to discuss our file with them. We did not get a response from them. We've tried to reach out to the person at the High Commission in the United States who's responsible for the security side, law enforcement side. We actually went to Washington. We did not get a response. And knowing that the Deputy Minister of Global Affairs Canada and the NSIA were meeting with a representative from the Indian government, we thought that this would be apropos for our Deputy Commissioner to join them and walk them through what we had for evidence. So perhaps that the ambassador, not the ambassador, but the High Commissioner never saw the evidence, but it was shared with a government official of India.
So at that meeting, there was evidence, not just intelligence, but evidence shared with the government of India.
There was evidence to demonstrate how agents working for the government of India here in Canada, through the diplomatic process and official consular, how taskings were done, how information would flow back to the government of India, into organized crime groups, and then back into Canada.
And prior to that, you said that there were other attempts from the Deputy Commissioner in order to, was it to get across to his kind of like a law enforcement counterpart in India?
You're correct, Vashi, to his counterpart in India.
In none of those were successful. Like, you wouldn't even get a response. Is that accurate?
None of those were successful. Obtaining a visa was not successful. We've actually, the High Commissioner was critical that he never saw evidence, but we actually tried to lift immunity to sit down with them, to have a conversation or interview the people, and that was refused.
And in that conversation, should you have had it, would evidence have been shared?
Evidence would have been shared no differently than what was shared with the government official, with the NSIA and Mr. Morrison from GAC.
And just to be clear, because another point that the Indian government keeps putting forward is that, you know, that it's intelligence that exists, best case, not evidence. And you've made the distinction in different arenas before. Do you stand by the characterization that evidence of their link to these crimes exists?
Well, evidence, the evidence that we have was presented to the Prime Minister, was presented to our Minister, was presented to the Minister of Global Affairs Canada, and I would say that our evidence is strong enough that government took a position to expel 6 diplomats.
Okay, and finally a point of clarification, because there have been some, I guess, characterizations of the press conference, questions raised, I guess you could say, by the opposition that it was, that you did that because the Prime Minister was going to testify a few days later or wanted to turn the page on other political issues. Was the decision to hold the press conference on Monday entirely of the RCMP's volition? Yeah,
it was. Actually, what's interesting, I'm not aware of the Prime Minister's schedule all the time. I know when he leaves Canada, but as to his appearances and inquiries and whatnot, I don't really track that. But this has been planned for quite some time. The exact date as to when we're going to come out was not identified. It was only after the ill attempts to reach out to the government of India's official to discuss the matter, the meeting that took place in Singapore with the Deputy Minister of Global Affairs as well as the NSIA, that following that meeting there was an article in the Indian media that kind of misrepresented some of the things that were said. So one, we were concerned about disinformation, misinformation, but the underlying factor is not reaching the key objectives. We said it's time to go out immediately because there's still a serious threat to the population.
And that was not at the direction of the Prime Minister's
No,
office?
never once have we been directed by the government, and my last 7 years in key positions in the organization, never once. And this is a file which is interesting, Vashi, because we brought this to our Minister and the Prime Minister and the Minister of Global Affairs Canada. We were generating and we were actually leading it, and then it was a coordinated approach.
You've been in policing for 35 years. This press conference, these allegations have made headlines around the world because they involve, agents of a government of a democratic country. Have you ever seen anything like this?
I've never seen this. It's actually a little surreal when you look at all this, but it's not unique to us. I go back to the indictments in the United States, where they picked up on the same thing, on the same, it's a modus operandi in the sense that you have government officials. The only difference is these people were in India, but you still had government officials and a key figure from organized crime that were involved in the tasking for this murder.
Just one final question on that. Have you ever, do you have a gut feeling, or have you figured out why, on the surface at least, they appear more willing to cooperate on the U.S. side, setting up that committee? Now, there are frustrations with whether that committee is actually, doing what it should be doing, but they appear at least willing to offer some level of cooperation that they were unwilling on the Canadian side.
You're referring to the inquiry that they're having over there?
Yeah, they have like a committee that they set up to investigate the claims that are in that indictment.
So that would be a question better posed to, I believe, the NSIA or Mr. Morrison from Global Affairs Canada, but I think that we wanted to go on that list, and we want to be part of this. We want to be a part of this to tell our story, but again, I don't think that was accepted by the Indian
More broadly
government.
on the issue of foreign interference, I wanted to ask you a question about Chinese foreign interference and a number of months ago, I think it was March of 2023, the RCMP confirmed that it was investigating the leak of classified information, that there was Chinese interference, the stuff that started getting reported by the Globe and Mail. Is that investigation still ongoing?
There's still ongoing investigation on the matter.
And nobody has been charged?
Not yet. You can understand, you got to appreciate the complexity of some of these files. It's just not one individual, but following, I'll give you an example, not necessarily particular in this case, but if there's a trail of money or information, who's involved, are these people all here, are these people on the international scene? So sometimes an investigation can be very complex.
Do you have any, and I take your point always that these are hard to predict, but it's been going on since March of 2023. Do you anticipate that there will be charges at some point?
There's, well, I don't want to say the gold standard, but we are always investigating with the objective of laying charges. But if a disruption like we did in this case with the government of India is satisfactory and meets the need, we can do that. But right now, we're still investigating.
And then I just want to ask you about one other issue that's been permeating through Parliament Hill. It's actually got Parliament Hill at a standstill. It's a decision an order by the House of Commons to ask the government to turn over documents related to something called Sustainable Development Technology Canada, SDTC for short. It's basically like a green tech fund that the Auditor General said was completely mired in conflicts of interest. The docs, what's interesting here is the order then provides for the documents to go, unredacted documents, to go directly to the RCMP. The first question I have is, are you investigating what went on at the SDTC? Because a couple of months ago, the RCMP offered one answer, and then it seems as though lately there is an investigation. Are you investigating?
So I can confirm that we are investigating. And we're going, we did receive the motion that was put forth in the House of Commons. We did receive a USB key that we have stored for the moment. We're still going through available information that's out there to conduct the investigation. And there are concerns. I've shared my concerns when it comes to the Charter of Rights. We're dealing with two different processes here. You're dealing with the legislative branch and the executive branch. And the concern that's been shared is the fact that we operate within a judicial process that's very strict. So if I need documents, I need grounds to go and get a search warrant to get those documents. And by going the other way, you're bringing documents that perhaps the police would never have any grounds to obtain these documents. So it's that balance. But what we're doing right now is we're going through everything that's publicly available, and then we'll assess what the next steps are.
What's a USB key? Like, what does that have to do?
Sorry, those little insert keys for the.
But like, what's that? What does that mean?
So
like,
that's
where
what
the documents are?
Yeah. So the law clerk. So what we had requested to facilitate our work, it was to make sure that every document was identified if it's parliamentary privilege and how it was obtained, because you got to understand that there's different process where the Office of the Attorney General, when she's doing her work, she operates through a certain set of rules, but those rules might be different when you come into criminal space. So you just can't take a document from her and bring it in. There's a process to do that. So the information was downloaded on a stick, on a USB stick, and we have it in our possession.
And you haven't looked through it yet, though?
We haven't gotten to that. We're exhausting everything we can in the public domain first.
And that stick that you have, is it your impression that contains information that you otherwise would have had to, obtain a warrant to obtain? Because there's still documents outstanding. That's why we're at a paralysis, basically, right?
Yeah, there's still
Aware,
documents out there, and again, I haven't seen what's on the stick, and I'll just comment to the fact that we're going through everything that's in the public domain. The ethics commissioner also has a report in which we're going through. If I go back to the Auditor General, she did not see any criminality in her review, and by her mandate is if she does see any criminality, she should stop her investigation and refer it to the RCMP, which hasn't happened. We're going through the...
So why are you investigating then, if you weren't a few months ago?
Well, we did. There was a complaint, and if we receive a complaint, we're investigating. So. And
where did that complaint originate?
I'd have to go back. I'm not quite sure. I'd love to tell you. It's no secret, but I just don't have it with me.
Is it political in nature, or is it
I don't remember. So
what exactly are you investigating then?
We're investigating if there is any breach of trust in providing contracts. Was there any fraud? Was there any theft? So, and you got to appreciate that when we go into investigation, we look at the different offenses, and we have to identify the key elements of an offense before we can even lay charge. And then, as I said earlier, if we go and get an information to obtain information, you need proper grounds to get that within the process that we operate, which is different from an administrative process or another process.
So just one final question, because there are still documents, unredacted documents, that the House contends has not been turned over by the government. If ultimately they do turn them over, I mean, the government's concern is that it's a breach of charter rights if it goes automatically, essentially, to the RCMP. If they do turn them over, what is the process? Will you take them and immediately look at them, or are you not immediately looking at them?
I'll go back to what I said earlier, Vashti, is we're going to go through everything that's public first and foremost, and then we'll have to sit down with the team and determine the next steps once we've exhausted everything that's in the public domain.
So it's not a hard no to looking at them, but it's not
yes. It's not a hard no to looking at them, but there are concerns from the initial conversations I've had with some of the lead investigators. There is some concerns on the charter side on how we're obtaining the information without any grounds and whatnot. So.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. I've taken up a lot of your time. I appreciate it very much. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks for having me.